Thank you, Susan, for that wonderful message. Of course, following up on Susan's message, we are now joined by other members of our panel. Of course, this includes Haldus Holt, who is the Deputy General Secretary for Education International. We also have Spiso Ndlovu, he is the CEO of Zimbabwe Teachers Association. But first, I'm going to begin with you, Svi. So you have already shared this wonderful presentation with Education International. Of course, this will be made online for those who would like to read through this presentation. But Svi, so our time is limited, so I really need to warn you there. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to climate change, how does this impact your country in which you come from, which is Zimbabwe, and what is the role education unions is in your country? What is the role that they are promoting when it comes to climate change education?
Thank you very much, Mbali. I would like to demonstrate the agency of climate change education in Zimbabwe and emphasize that it comes through the eyes and experiences of Cyclone Idai, which hit the Zimbabwean eastern border, in particular our Manicaland province on the 15th of March 2019, where we experienced a loss of life, and many of our learners paid the supreme price of poorly managed climate in this global, this earth of ours, where we had 120 learners who passed on, who were in the grades ECD up to advanced level, and 6 educators, including their spouses. 2 spouses perished in that dilemma. We saw also the destruction of schools' infrastructure, when we lost learning and teaching materials, including school time. And we also had a destruction of the health services facilities. And this led to vector-borne diseases that were coming through. And we saw the rise of cholera and malaria and also typhoid. These were some of the experiences which were nasty as a result of this bad management of the climate that were brought to ourselves. Finally, we saw the loss of income with a number of parents and learners, teachers losing income, which was supposed to take their livelihoods forward and their standards of living. This indicates the agency that we must involve ourselves as unions in trying to arrest the issue of degradation of our environment. And what role do the unions have to play? Obviously, the most natural role that we have to do is the issue of knowledge broking. We are the knowledge brokers, and we need to do the research. We also need to provide the leadership wherever we are in society, which can influence the thinking of our society towards a better managed climate. And using climate change education, we can use it as a very important utility tool. We can see that it is embraced in our target 4.7 of the SDG 4. So using that, we can see ourselves therefore interfacing with many organizations and departments, and also many other activists who are interested in achieving the SDG 13 and 16. As a diagnostic tool, quality climate education will help us show the world that the bad climate that we have is affecting disproportionately the vulnerable members of our society. For example, in our case in Zimbabwe, we saw that the urban schools were differently affected, unlike the rural schools which were in Manicaland, which were devastatingly affected. So there is therefore that impact which is disproportionate to the vulnerability of any member of society or group. And as a responsive tool, we are going to be using this climate change education to try and recreate our institutions such that they are safe institutions for our learners, they are safe institutions for our teachers, they are safe institutions for our community, and they can be resilient to any forms of change in climate. So that is very important in terms of influencing our direction towards quality climate change education. And lastly, as an adaptive tool, we will see it as a tool that will help us restructure our curriculum, particularly the issue of mainstreaming the content of climate education into all learning areas around us beyond the STEM disciplines. Previously, we've been emphasizing through the STEM disciplines the issues of around climate change, but now we must broaden that and include almost every area. And lastly, I would like to say the movement forward in Zimbabwe, for example, has seen us focusing on the pedagogy, the aspects on which we can influence our teaching, where we are talking about teacher capacity building in terms of disaster risk management. We also do the issue of teacher capacity building in terms of understanding climate education. This is a way where we have influenced even the education sector in our country in its education strategic plan to bring this as part of the focal point, which will be pursued in the strategic plan 2021-2025 of our education. Interestingly, we have also been working with the Ministry of Environment, Climate, Tourism and Hospitality Industry, which has come up with a very grand strategy of the National Climate Change Learning Strategy. So interfacing with these groups in government and other civic organizations, there has been a good influence. And I think this way we can, as teachers, have an impact. And we have been doing it in a small way from our own side as Zimbabwe Teachers Association. And lastly, of course, the development of teaching material is of paramount importance. And that must be anchored by wide support, where we can bring about literature that can support our learners and teachers in how to teach. I must thank you, Mbali. This, in the shortest space of time, is what I can say about the agency of quality climate education in this world.
Thank you so much, Sifiso, for that insight. Of course, now we will be bringing Susan back. And Susan, my question to you is, as Education International, it does view climate change education as a key component of quality education, and most importantly, a right for all students. Can you elaborate on why this is so?
Well, Mbali, look, the climate crisis is as existential for educators, our students, our communities, the entire planet. And we know that we're in an emergency, and so we've got to use every tool that we can to meet that crisis: mitigation, adaptation, persuasion, prevention, just to name a few. And it's the core, it's the essence of our role as educators to give our students the tools to be active citizens, to understand the world they live in, to see a future they can own, to work and act in collaboration with others on complex issues like sustainability. But for me, one of the critical things is that the future belongs to our students. It is their future, and they have the right to have the knowledge and the skills, the literacy, to be able to stand up and argue and create a world that they want to live in, a safe world, one where we are actually addressing the issues of climate change, a world that will exist for many generations to come. And in the end, I think that's the reason why we've got to ensure that all of our students can receive climate education.
Thank you, Susan. And now to bring in our other panelist, of course, we will be now speaking to Haldus. And Haldus, you know, at a time like this, we are in a pandemic. The world is facing the pandemic of the coronavirus, and Education International is, of course, having this a global education summit at a very crucial time. If you can just tell us why action for climate change education is necessary even more now, and it simply just cannot wait.
You're right, Mbali, and I think you just said it, that we simply cannot wait. And I think our president, Susan, also said that very clearly in her opening remarks, that it's not a moment to lose. And I think we've seen all through this pandemic that teachers and other educators have kept on working. And they've been acknowledged for that. They've been out there for their students, whether it's been online, whether it's been on radio, whether it's been driving around, trying to deliver an education that is relevant for them here and now and for the future. And even though we are in a pandemic, the challenges for the future haven't disappeared. So we need them to be part of the education we deliver today and tomorrow. And climate change is one of them. It's not just about learning to read and write. That's important because they are important tools to be able to acquire knowledge, to utilize knowledge, and to reflect on how you can make a difference. Teachers and education, like Susan said, is about the future. And what our students are concerned with, and also sometimes expects fear for, is a future that is impacted by climate change. And I think that's why educators are so concerned of having a content and an education that addresses this so that it's relevant for our students. Some already have that curriculum. Some are already dealing with this on a daily basis, but others need that framework to be able to use the time and space to be relevant for their students, and also to give them the educational space that also is safe to reflect on the knowledge that is out there, to reflect on how this impacts on their daily life. Like Sifuso had the example from Zimbabwe, and Susan also from the Asia Pacific. Our students live the consequences of climate change every day. And they need to be able, as I said, to reflect and acquire knowledge so that they can develop how they can make a change for the future. Because they can. Because we need to instill that hope that Susan reflected to, that they feel, yes, I can make a change. As an activist, as a citizen, when acquiring your skills for the job and the career you want to do, that you see that, yes, I can do that in a better future within a green economy. And that's the purpose that teachers want to be there for their students, including other educators, to everyone who interacts with young people. You want to be able to be relevant for them today, and young people are asking for this. In a way, we could even say that we have a lot to learn from young people because they can teach those of us that have been around a long time and have difficulties in changing our habits that, yes, it's possible to act in a different way. Yes, it's possible to think in a different way. Yes, it's possible to implement other solutions. And our students are the future. They are going to give us those solutions, and we need an education to deliver that. Teachers today, educators today are ready to do that. Even though we are in a pandemic, they're not teaching about the pandemic every day. They're trying to teach the full breadth of the curriculum, and they're preparing for the day that the pandemic is over. We have to prepare for recovery too. And teaching about climate change education is part of the recovery because that is also interconnected with all the other challenges we have, also when it comes to inequalities around the world. And we need to see how they interact and how we can create a better future that is more just for all our students, our Indigenous students, for girls, for people with disabilities, all the people that now we see are more affected by the pandemic are more or less the same people that will be more affected by climate change. And we need to step up and equip our students so they can make a change. So yes, it's important, and teachers want to do it now.
Thank you there, Haldis, and thank you to all our leaders for outlining the significance of this campaign, and of course, why it is so urgent. Now, students have the right to quality education, which must prepare them to build a sustainable future. Teachers also have a responsibility to act in their classrooms as well as in their communities, and also call on governments to ensure that this right is fulfilled. Before we go to our next panel, and when we look at how our members are leading on climate change education,